Tonight on CTV News, the Justice Minister rejects an inquiry into the Peter Ellis case. An outspoken developer criticises Sarah for its overseas junkets, and two local filmmakers and their take on Game of Thrones.
Broadcasting across Canterbury, from the CTV studio, this is First at 5.
Good evening. The Justice Minister is rejecting suggestions she's had an axe to grind against convicted child molester Peter Ellis. The Minister has rejected a request from former author Lindley Hood and former National Party leader Don Brash for a commission of inquiry into the Peter Ellis convictions.
Convicted child sex offender Peter Ellis will not get a commission of inquiry. Justice Minister Amy Adams today announced the government would not further investigate his case. Ellis was convicted in 1993 for child sex offences while working at the Christchurch Civic Creche and spent 7 years in prison. He's always protested his innocence, with the argument that his conviction was based on unreliable evidence from children interviewed in a leading way. The Justice Minister's reasoning for not proceeding with the Commission of Inquiry is that Ellis can still challenge his conviction through the courts. Former lawyer Nigel Hampton QC says the inquiry had a narrow focus.
If the Minister had been minded to, she could have cast the inquiry in quite wide terms to look at an overall position and not just restricted to the convictions of Peter Ellis.
Hampton says today's decision is upsetting for Ellis, who thought he'd get the inquiry his supporters sought.
He put some store on it, given the width and the depth of support that he'd received. He had prominent people supporting the petition.
He says Ellis's next step is to go through the courts.
Take further another application to the Governor-General for the prerogative of mercy, or still alive is his right to apply to the Privy Council on appeal, and it may be that is the latter is the one that he may follow.
Ellis has already had two appeals, an inquiry by a former Chief Justice and two overseas experts, and a 2003 petition to Parliament. A similar commission of inquiry was rejected by former Justice Minister Simon Power in 2008. The case is one of New Zealand's most enduring crime judicial controversies. 2 books and numerous articles have been written about the case, and Nigel Hampton is confident Ellis could one day see his conviction overturned. Marcus Gibbs, CTV News.
An outspoken Christchurch developer is criticising Sarah for sending 2 staff members to Sri Lanka and India on a so-called investment mission. Anthony Goff believes the trip would have been a time waster because there's no reason for international investors to actually spend their cash in the city. Here's Marcus Gibbs.
Christchurch's CBD is full of blank spaces, but local developer Anthony Goff says overseas investors aren't interested.
We have no out-of-town people coming to Christchurch, not even Aucklanders.
The Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority has tried to drum up international interest by sending 2 staff members on an investment mission to India and Sri Lanka with government ministers. The trip has cost taxpayers $25,000, but speaking on CTV's Lynch last night, Anthony Goff told presenter Chris Lynch it was a wasted mission.
We haven't rushed off to Japan where they had a tsunami and the nuclear fallout. Why would you? We don't know decedents, so why do they expect overseas people? It's not going to happen. Hey, in 10 years' time, yes, but not now.
The outspoken developer doesn't know of any international investors developing property in Christchurch. Instead, it's developers like himself who are leading the charge in the central city. Goff's $150 million precinct is due to be completed early next year.
Thank goodness, the local passionate people, nutters like me. Hey, you've got to be slightly nutty to do this thing.
In a statement, Sarah says last November's trade mission to India and Sri Lanka has resulted in a number of influential representatives of Indian investors and businesses travelling to Christchurch to look at opportunities in the city. India is looking at smarter ways to build its own new cities, and there are now discussions underway about investment opportunities. Last week, in another statement, Sarah told CTV there's international backing and involvement in businesses and developments, but not everything has been made public. This followed comments made by Christchurch City Councillor Glenn Livingston to CTV News. He says the amount of broken buildings still standing in the CBD may be putting off investors.
Once those claims are resolved, people can go ahead and pursue their development. So I've got some big questions over how fast and how much pressure is actually going on these insurers.
The Insurance Council of New Zealand says 86% of commercial claims resulting from the Canterbury earthquakes are now complete, and Councillor Livingston wants the government to put pressure on insurers to speed up the rest.
There are old abandoned buildings sitting there. Doesn't look good. So yeah, I think the pressure needs to go on these insurance companies to get the claims processed.
Councillor Jamie Goff says investment might not make business sense for international investors.
The commercial proposition probably isn't attractive enough. There is a huge amount of risk there. There's a lot of the unknown, as we've discussed, although it may have plateaued, but cost of construction has been particularly higher than other centres, and that risk profile is also higher.
He says Sarah should be targeting local investors, and his uncle Anthony Goff agrees.
So you've got all these actual passionate local people that are buried there. They're looking for a home. Hey, give it 2 years, we're going to have lots of those sort of things around.
Time will tell whether Sarah's vision for a city filled with international investors becomes a reality. Marcus Gibbs, CTV News.
And business reporter Warren Head will join me in the studio shortly to talk more about the potential investment in this city. Well, Sarah has confirmed its acting CEO, John Ombler, will continue into the end of next year or this year. Ombler took over from Roger Sutton last year following his resignation into sexual harassment allegations. Sarah is in the process of being deconstructed in terms of its powers, and they'll be finalised by the government in August. Game of Thrones, it's the TV show that has taken the world by storm. Season 5 launched last week alongside a new mockumentary series made by 2 Kiwi filmmakers.
Hayden Cook has a serious problem.
I am a gothead.
The self-confessed Game of Thrones fan says the popular TV show is taking over his life.
You start having some in the evenings, you start having the odd waken thrown. Before you know it, you're throning more often than not, and you look at yourself one day, the sun's coming up and you haven't slept because once again you've throned all night.
He watches hours of the show every week, or at least his character does. In real life, Hayden Cook, along with his buddy Sam O'Neill, is a filmmaker, creating a mockumentary about Game of Thrones addicts. But the addiction portrayed in his web series is not far from reality.
It's kind of very blissful when you're there in the thick of the episode, and then waiting a week in between each episode is kind of quite it's sort of a form of torture in its way. But that's nothing compared to the year that you then have to wait between seasons themselves.
The series is scripted to compare a Game of Thrones addiction to something far more extreme.
There are moments when I realise the person I've become, and I'm ashamed of that person, and others are ashamed of me.
Where the humour derives from in our series is more treating it as something that people literally can't escape, like something that might resemble real addictive substances.
Each episode takes several weeks of planning, filming and editing, but the talented team love every minute of it.
Because it is really sort of observational comedy. It's kind of just laughing at the way people sort of just act normally and their idiosyncrasies that way.
Each episode is a challenge to produce. Where HBO's Game of Thrones episodes have $1 million budgets, the Gotheads have a lot less to spend. There is no room for professional actors in this production, which dramatically reduces the overheads for each episode.
Our budget is a bit lower than that. We're sort of spending more like probably $50 or less on each episode.
Hayden's real-life dad, Grant, stars in the series and is a fan favourite. But after seeing his performance, you might be surprised to learn this is his first time on camera.
Hi guys, come on in. Remember my wife Jen?
Hi there.
Come through the lounge, this is where the magic happens. This is the setup. Computers over there.
The young filmmakers plan to release a webisode a week on the same day as the latest Game of Thrones TV episodes. The Gotheads have a Facebook page and their own fan following is quickly growing.
We'd really hope to access larger Game of Thrones fan bases online.
This is the first project of its kind for this team, but it won't be their last. They're passionate about their craft. And perhaps one day these filmmakers will even work in television, maybe somewhere like CTV. Marcus Gibbs, CTV News.
Still to come, where is the international investment? We'll discuss that next. Hi, I'm Chris Lynch. Join me every Monday at 8:30 on CTV as we discuss the issues affecting you, your family and everything to do with Canterbury. That's CTV 8:30 right here.
Computer not working? Replace or repair? DIY or get a technician? Looking for parts? Thinking of upgrading? Need accessories? You've got questions, we've got answers. Global PC.
The preparation, the devotion, the fearlessness, the intensity.
Runway model management. First impressions are everything.
Made to measure interiors, made with care, made for you.
Join Graham Sinclair and the team at Gone Fishin' as they bring you great stories, fishing tips and beautiful scenery. Gone Fishin', Friday night at 8:30, right here on CTV.
And welcome back to CTV News. Well, if you saw the Lynch programme last night, you would have seen developer Anthony Goff having cover Sarah, essentially suggesting there's no new international investment coming into the city. Is he right? Joining me now is business commentator Warren Head. How are you? Good to see you.
Oh, I'm good, thanks, Raj.
Is he right? Is there any international investors, new international investment really coming into the city, do you think, Warren?
Well, I don't think his intel is 100%. He's pretty well positioned, you would say, and he's related to people who would be in the know as well. But I've heard about American consortia looking at parts of Christchurch, not necessarily the CBD. 3 weeks back, we had a major India business mission in town. A lot of CERA officials were there. I was there for the afternoon. I didn't see any developers there. They were interested in investing into Christchurch.
I guess what he's suggesting is, what really is the point of anybody from Sri Lanka and India to invest their cash, their hard-earned money, into a dive like Christchurch?
There's a lot of competition out there right now. Our biggest competition really is Auckland. Auckland's got big plans for the waterfront up there as well. So it's quite logical to see some developers like Christo the other day saying that he was moving out of the square and looking at Auckland. There's good opportunity up there as well.
Well, he's saying he's had too much of a hard time with CERA.
Well, CERA's fundamental issue, I think, going forward will be this 5-level cap. Now, if I was in there as an owner-developer before the earthquakes and I had a 20-storey building, I could build up to that level. And then if I go in as a new chum into that area, I'm only allowed to go to 5, which is kind of uneconomic at the build costs that are tied to these buildings now, where it's probably about 2 floors below ground that you don't see before they come upstairs. The foundation cost is probably anywhere 25, 28, 30% now. So, you know, you've got a bit of airspace to build before you start to get that back. And that's why we're seeing these rentals going through 400 square metres of space, which then is competing on the wrong side, if you're on the one side of the river, the eastern side, with the west side of the river, which is, they say, slightly lower, but there's probably incentives in there as well to fill those towers.
Why has the west side of the river got its act together, but the east side, surprise, surprise, CERA-controlled areas, is so slow?
Well, it's a problematic area for a start. It always has been. The square's a difficult place to build. Builders have gone bust in the square 50 years or so ago. There's a lot of aquifers and things running through there. The geotech's much more complex. But it will be, in my view, the place to be once those big government projects kick in and you've got thousands of people working there. And then there'll be the need for the service industries to go around those. So there's going to be a large number of government workers in that precinct, and I think possibly the towers that have been built now, they weren't there in that scale previously, so there's more people have been sucked out of the core. So I think, can you get value back? I was reading an interesting book the other day. I'm interested in what's happened in other cities and relating them. And if you look at the growth of Manhattan, for example, I'm reading one very interesting at the moment, where they built high-rise apartment blocks, short stories, 3 stories, and today they're worth just mega millions, because people bought them up in the 1890s to 1900s. And maybe that's what Christchurch Cathedral Square needs to consider itself to be in the future, a desirable inner city place to live with beautiful apartments. And all the developers, once they've got a lot of money from building towers, can go and live there.
Trouble is, though, from what my understanding is there are no local investors that give 2 hoots about having any wraparound support, any businesses around the so-called anchor project. At the moment, there's simply none. Look, serious be commended, at least the bus exchange is coming in on time, the Justice Precinct's looking good.
Yes.
But where are the local guys? The local guys, will they be able to afford the land to wrap around these services, though?
Well, let's get a real handle on where things are at. The best reading I've seen on this recently has been by one of the major banks, and fundamentally the building work right now is twice the level it was pre-earthquake. That's the first point. Start of 2015, reconstruction was probably only 30% complete. That's talking about the non-residential areas. Yes, there have been delays. It's complex in there. There's a list of things you need to comply with, whereas you go to Auckland, it's a much shorter list. So you need to get the list shorter, and there's been a bit of work done on that. At probably end of 2014, the bill was up about 40% on the year before, 2013, and it was 150% greater than before the earthquake. So anybody who says there's not anything happening simply is talking nuts, because there's a lot happening. Right now, there's about half of the reconstruction that will be completed in the next 2 years. So what we're seeing now is the residential repairs and construction work starting to peak off, and it'll come off quite quickly soon. And we'll start to see the infrastructure and public assets moving up, and we'll start to see the commercial build, which is really only going to be about 10 billion at tops of the 35 billion. It's the latest figure I've got. That's going to be built overall. So there's still a lot to be done. The infrastructure work, the skirt work is about 2.5 billion. That's about 2/3 done. So to come, I'd say we've got about 8-9 billion of public assets still to come. Yes, it is frustrating. I was with a UK trade mission the other night at the Novotel. I was surrounded by rubble really outside, and they said, we're astounded at how slow things are. We didn't think it was this bad. I was with an Al Jazeera film crew in Christchurch just today, and they hadn't been here in 5 years. They were amazed at the slowness of what was happening. So, there's a lot
What do you put that slowness down to?
It's caution. Money is going to be committed for a long period of time, so the numbers are difficult to work. They're difficult to work everywhere, and those first off the block, Victoria Street and Addington, have probably got the lion's share of the professional firms at this
Are we going to
stage.
have an oversupply of office space in central Christchurch?
Well, right now, let's see. Colliers say, according to media reports, that it's probably about 88% leased now, about 12% vacancy. That's not too bad. I mean, Wellington runs at 10-12% all of the time. Auckland's down about 8%, so it's natural. It's natural that real estate companies would like to lease the lot. Nobody can quickly lease the lot, so it's going to take a while.
So, final, slow and steady wins the race, Warren Head.
I agree with that, yeah.
All right, Warren Head from headliners.co.nz, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming in. We'll sort of come at your region's weather.
With all the latest innovations in the world of technology, Shift has everything you need to stay informed and in the know. Shift, 2:15 on Monday, right here on CTV.
Opus is recreating the heart of Canterbury. From large-scale projects to commercial buildings. Your design, your vision. Opus.
Colour in your life. Colour Steel, the roof of New Zealand.
Diversity. No deposit. Instant finance. Convenience. Open 7 days. Austin Motor Company.
Drive It showcases the new arrivals to the motoring world, comparing and testing the latest models to discover which one is the best. Drive It, Sunday afternoons at 2:30, only on CTV.
They might have lost last week, but they're not giving up hope. The Crusaders are hoping for a better result this weekend against the Blues and hopefully a better lead into this year's Rugby World Cup. Here's Jared McCulloch.
They're more than halfway through the Super Rugby Championship, with the Crusaders having had a mixed bag of results, winning only 4 games so far. And it wasn't their match on Friday here on home soil, with the men in red and black being taken down by the Chiefs, a disappointing 26-9. But the side hasn't given up hope just yet, determined to get back on track, focusing on one game at a time.
We've got a great challenge on our hands at the moment. We're not in a great position at the moment, but we truly believe that we can get ourselves out of it. And if we take that game-by-game approach and really just nail each performance, then we're going to give ourselves a chance to do that. So the challenge has certainly become a bit more interesting for everybody, but definitely up for the challenge.
He says there's a lot of work to be done, one focus in particular aiming to take advantage of ball in hand, with the game on Friday showcasing the errors and letting the Chiefs in on multiple try-scoring opportunities. And Major says it's frustrating.
Because we're creating just as many opportunities as any other side in the competition. You look at line breaks and offloads and gain line breakdown, all that sort of stuff. So we've really got to be a bit better down the score zone part of the field. We're probably a little bit frantic and missing opportunities. And as you see in the weekend, the Chiefs made us pay when we turned those over, and they scored tries from those mistakes.
And he says they'll work on position to help improve their games.
The team that's controlling the ball controls the game really, and we probably haven't done that as well as what we could have the last couple of weeks. We probably gave too many opportunities to 2 good oppositions, and they took them and we didn't take ours.
There was talk around the upcoming Rugby World Cup as well, with Chiefs player Aaron Cruden not ruling out if he'll be available for the championship due to a ruptured ligament in his knee against the Crusaders. It now could open the door for one of the side's players. With the World Cup in mind, Crusaders flanker Matt Todd is hoping Cruden makes a good recovery.
Yeah, you never want to see people get injured, but I guess it is part of footy. It's a contact sport, and injuries do happen. So you got to feel for Crude. Massive year obviously with the World Cup at the end, and it looks like his injury might take him out. So you just feel for him and wish him all the best in his recovery.
But he says his immediate focus is the Crusaders, making sure they succeed.
I think people just focus on Super Rugby, it's sort of getting up into the business end and the crucial time. So, you worry about playing well for your franchise and other stuff, takes care of itself down the road. But, you get caught looking too far ahead, then that's when you don't perform well.
There was also mention of fears for Dan Carter not being up to scratch for the 2015 tournament in England later on this year in September. The All Black legend had a rough game at the weekend, missing multiple penalty attempts. But Major says he isn't worried about Carter, still having faith in the first 5.
I think he'll prove it through the rest of the season and throughout the year. I think he'll be on top of his game by the time the All Blacks hit the World Cup.
The next rivals for the Crusaders will be the bottom of the New Zealand Conference table, the Blues, on Anzac Day, right here at AMI Stadium on Saturday. And they'll be hoping for a better result. Jared McCulloch, CTV Sport.
Now it's time for the region's weather.
Hello Canterbury, let's take a look at today's weather. Timaru, Temuka and Geraldine, you're all on 14 today. Methven, Ashburton and Rikai, similar picture for you too, 14 degrees. Darfield, Leeston and Rolleston, you are all on a high of 14 today. Lincoln and Christchurch, 14 degrees. Over in Akaroa today, it was a similar scenario for you too, on 14 degrees. Further north, Rangiora, Kaipoi and Amberley, you are all on 15 today.
She thinks I know something, maybe she thinks it's fine.
Colvin, Hamner Springs and Cheviot, 15 for you.
She knows something I don't, I'm so...
Kaikoura, 15 degrees. Let's take a look at tomorrow's weather now. Timaru will be mostly cloudy with northeasterly winds, but some sunny periods will develop during the afternoon. Your low tonight is 10, tomorrow's high 15 degrees.
So don't tell me, you might just let it go.
Ashburton, there'll be some low cloud at first, but they will break during the afternoon, bringing through some sunny periods and moderate northeasterly winds throughout the day. Your overnight low is 10, your high tomorrow 15 degrees.
'Cause no one likes to be let down.
Taking a look at Christchurch now, any early drizzle periods will clear, leaving it to be a dry and mostly cloudy day with some cool northeasterly winds. Tonight's low is 10, tomorrow's high 15 degrees.
Eyes and I know that when she said she's gonna try, well it might not.
To Kaikoura now, be some drizzle patches at first, but they'll be mostly dry with rather cloudy skies and a cool northeasterly breeze. Tonight's low is 10, tomorrow's high 15.
I wouldn't wanna break on. Maybe she'll help.
Let's take a look at the other areas around the region now. Temuka and Geraldine, you'll have some cloud throughout the day and a high of 18 degrees. Methven and Rikai, a cloudy day for you with a high of 15. Darfield, Leeston and Rolleston, you will see some cloudy skies with a high of 15. Lincoln, similar picture, 15 degrees. Over in Akaroa tomorrow, expect the cloud to be around all day, your high 15 degrees. Further north, Rangiora, Kaipoi and Amberley, expect some cloud throughout the day, your high tomorrow is expected to be 15 degrees. As for Colvin, Hamner Springs and Cheviot, expect some cloud and a high of 15. Looking ahead for Canterbury now, there will be still some mostly cloudy skies on Thursday, but that will disappear by the afternoon, bringing some bright sunny periods throughout the day. Northeasterly winds will be around as well. As for Friday, it'll be fine with sunny periods and high cloud, quite humid too, with some moderate breezy northeasterly winds. Taking a look at the weekend now, there'll be some similar conditions to Friday, sunny and high cloud with some fresh northeasterly winds, and Sunday cloudy with some rain developing after dark and fresh northerly winds. On Monday there'll be some high cloud at first and northerly winds, but they'll get cooler with a southwest change and showers coming in the afternoon. But for now, that is your weather for Tuesday.
And that's CTV News. Have a great evening.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.